The Ryme of the Ancient Mariner by Samuel Taylor Coleridge is a tale that embodies the Romantic era of literature. The story begins with a man on his way to a wedding. While heading to the venue, he is interrupted by an old sailor. The mariner offers the wedding guest a story. He quickly tries to escape the conversation, but the mariner just keeps speaking. The mariner's tale begins with a ship parting from the docks and heading south. Out of nowhere, a huge storm shows up and blows the ship even further south, all the way to the South Pole. The mariner and his crew are absolutely baffled as they find themselves amidst glaciers and snow. The Arctic climate's pretty lifeless, until one day an albatross appears. The ship's sailors see the albatross as good luck, and they greet it every day as it flies behind the ship. All is fine until one day, the mariner decides to randomly shoot and kill the albatross. This makes the sailors pretty mad because they thought the albatross was a sign of good luck. Surprisingly though, after the albatross dies, the ship leaves the cold climate. Unfortunately, the crew was in for a rude awakening as they traveled north into a vast, calm sea with the sun beating on them. The crew grows so thirsty that they can't even speak, and they begin to accept their fate, until the mariner sees a ghostly ship in the distance. He bites his arm and drinks the blood to allow himself to speak, alerting the crew of the ship. To the mariner's surprise, on the deck of the ship, death and life in death gamble for the lives of the sailors and the mariner. Life in death prevails, winning the mariner's soul. The mariner then has to watch as his crew slowly dies of thirst. Surrounded by his late crew, the mariner attempts to look towards heaven and pray. He fails, but in this moment, the moonlight captures his attention. In the night's dazzling gleam, the mariner notices beautiful water snakes swimming beside the ship. In some spiritual epiphany, the mariner reaches the realization that nature is to be treated with respect. In that moment, the albatross's body falls into the sea. Angels then begin to reanimate the bodies of the dead sailors, and the spirit of the South Pole starts to move the ship homeward. Eventually, the mariner sees a small boat containing a pilot, the pilot's boy, and a hermit. Just as the small boat approaches, the mariner's ship begins to sink. Fortunately, the mariner wakes up and finds himself in the pilot's boat. The crew assume that the mariner's dead, but he suddenly wakes up and starts to speak, leaving the small group on the boat shocked in fear. As a sort of thank you, the mariner decides to save his saviors and row them to shore. There, he turns to the hermit and begs him to absolve his sins. The hermit then crosses himself and asks the mariner, "What manner of man art thou?" The mariner then feels compelled to tell his story. The tale ends with the mariner explaining to the wedding guest how he travels land to land, telling his story to many of the people he comes across. He explains how he can tell who needs to hear the story and who doesn't, and how he is filled with an agonizing sensation when he denies his urge to tell the tale. The mariner's final lesson is that prayer is the greatest joy in life, and the best prayers come from love and the reverence of all God's creation. The poem's conclusion goes as follows. Now, the wedding guest turned from the bridegroom's door. He went like one that hath been stunned, and is of sense forlorn. A sadder and wiser man, he rose the morrow morn. Okay, time to analyze. First things first, what's the theme? With older works like this, it can be hard to pull a clear-cut message from the story. Fortunately, we're given multiple elements that help construct a few core messages within the tale. Three major ones being compassion, redemption, and respect. The mariner fails to show compassion when he impulsively shoots the albatross. However, his character develops, and we see him show compassion later in the story when he rows the crew to shore. This exact development within the mariner is resemblant of the story's redemption theme. And we see a core theme of respect in the story's climax, once the mariner learns to respect the beauty of nature around him. Another question to ask is, if this is a core example of Romantic era literature, what's so romantic about it? Well, Romanticism isn't exactly just two characters falling in love. There's actually a very long list of elements that make up Romantic era literature. The three most prevalent in this story being nature, the sublime, and the supernatural. Romantic works tend to depict nature as beautiful and inspirational. I feel that there's no better example than this than the mariner's epiphany during the climax of the story. I mean, the guy saw some water snakes and found a new lease on life because of it. The mariner's experience is pretty much what defines the sublime, another element of romantic literature that describes the awe-inspiring power of nature. And of course, we see many aspects of the supernatural, with the effects of the albatross, and of course the gamble for life and death.